Part of this KED proposal development workshop series. This is the one on winning proposal strategies, so hopefully we'll just tell you how to go win a whole bunch of money to do cool research. My name is Jamie Winterton. I'm the Director of Strategy at the Global Security Initiative. Wearing this mic is weirding me out because I can hear myself, so sorry about that. I started at ASU about 4.5 years ago. I was a scientist at Lockheed Martin for 11 years before that, working primarily in synthetic aperture radar for military customers. I came to the university because I wanted something a little bit different to do. So there are so many potential opportunities here, especially for cross-disciplinary collaboration that don't always happen in industry, and I thought that was pretty exciting. I am a recovering physicist. I do a lot of cross-disciplinary connections with faculty, plugging folks into Department of Defense, intelligence community, Homeland Security opportunities. And because I don't know any better, I enrolled myself in a PhD program in human and social dimensions of science and technology. And this is Christina Nelson.
Hi everyone, I'm Christina Nelson. I'm a project manager and proposal manager in GSI. I've been here at ASU about 3.5 years and had the opportunity to be part of many proposals in that time. It's been great. And about 3 years ago, I got certified in proposal management. I am a very, very big fan of kickoff meetings and retrospectives. You'll hear more about that in a minute. Communication's sort of my mantra, and probably because I'm getting a master's in technical communication. Just as an overview, please feel free to ask questions at any time. We will have Q&A at the end, but feel free to interrupt. And the slides will be available, so don't feel like you need to frantically write.
Mm-hmm. Christina was the first person I hired, actually. So that's kind of a fun fact. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about our organization before we start to talk about proposals more broadly. We have a couple of centers that we've stood up in the last 4 years. GSI just had our 4th birthday. We had cupcakes. The first one is our Center for Cybersecurity and Digital Forensics. We're bringing research together around this interplay between humans and automated cyber reasoning systems. We also have a DHS-funded Center for Accelerating Operational Efficiency, so using data in different ways to learn more about how we can be more efficient. And then our Center for Human AI Robot Teaming. A lot of times we'll develop technologies as technologists and not think about the people that are going to have to use them or team with them. So this is a center about how to make these heterogeneous systems more effective. We also have different areas that we're starting to build out into, but a lot of people will say, what department are you in? We're actually not in a department. We try to bring people from different departments to work together on interesting problem spaces. I thought it would be good to provide some credibility. If we're going to talk to you about winning proposals, I should show you that we have won some proposals. Our expenditures for 2018 are a little under $20 million, and we're projecting a little over $25 million in 2019. So we have written a lot of proposals, and we've done a pretty good job of bringing them in, too. And this isn't all due to the fact that we can do good proposal management. There's obviously some fantastic capability at the university, but knowing how to shape that capability and plug it into a sponsor who's willing to fund it is a lot of what we're going to be talking to you about today. And so they tell you in presentations, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. So this is the part where I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, so you don't have to write all this down. You'll see it again in a couple, over all of those different slides. And Christina came up with this awesome analogy, which I love because I love analogies and all of mine are food related, that proposals are like making a meal. So you want to start out and figure out, what are we making? Let's pick a recipe. What do we have in the pantry? What are we maybe really good at making? What's the occasion? If it's Thanksgiving, you might not want to make hot dogs. Maybe you do, that's up to you. But something that's appropriate for your sponsor. So the analogy here is knowing what you're working with in the university and knowing the sponsor and what their expectations are. And then staff your kitchen appropriately. We're not going to use the home cooking. We're going to use like the big sort of Food Network analogy here of making a meal. Understanding who you should bring to the table to get this project done. So who are going to be your PIs, your co-Is, your subs, and then a lot of other folks that the PIs don't necessarily think about during this. So the proposal manager, the graphic artist, the RA, bringing everybody together in the initial steps of formulating the proposal, so that way everybody has situational awareness of what's going on. Prepping your ingredients, making sure you have the right kinds of ingredients to move forward. If you're connecting with a sponsor, they'll generally want to see specific things, and we'll go into a little bit more detail on these things. But getting that right connection with the person that you hope to have fund your proposal is really a critical step. Preheat the oven, hold a kickoff meeting. Christina will talk a lot about effective ways to do that. And just keep stirring. Keep it all moving together. We've seen a lot of proposals that start off with a really great intent, and then everybody gets a little bit distracted, so making sure that everyone stays focused, and so you get to the finish line on that is important too. So let's talk about picking your recipe and knowing your ingredients. Knowing your sponsor is a huge piece of this. What role does a program manager play? What objectives does your organization have? I lead our DARPA working group, and so I will talk a lot about DARPA and use that as an example, but we'll try to broaden that out because I know not everybody's working in DoD or necessarily even in technology. But understanding how to connect in. One of the biggest issues that I see is sometimes people will say, well, I don't want to talk to a program manager at DARPA. I want to talk to someone in leadership, which is a valiant thing to want to do. But all of the decision making is at the program level at DARPA. Your program managers are the ones that control the purse strings, they come up with the ideas, they're responsible for creating the programs, so that's the right place to enter. Conversely, in other organizations, it may be better to talk to somebody in management if you have a brand new idea that hasn't been established into a program yet. So knowing how your sponsor is organized and how they work is very important. And what are you going to give them to make that introduction to yourself? I always talk about quad charts when we're doing a Department of Defense connection, but if you take those Department of Defense quad charts that they love and bring them over to the NSF or the NIH, they're not going to have a clue what you're talking about. So knowing what kind of things to give them to make the introduction is very important. You want to establish your credibility and that you understand the problems that they're trying to solve. We do a lot of monitoring of opportunities in our organization, so we'll try to connect on the relationship level, but we also want to know what is going on out there. What are they funding? What are their trajectories? Do they seem to be funding a lot of things in a certain area? That can be indicative of a building portfolio that they're going to spin off into something larger. So knowing what's going on, not just for the actual calls, but internally. What are the conversations going on? What are the events that they're having? DARPA has spun up over the last 2 years a lot in artificial intelligence, and they've made this public in the last, I would say, 6 months with their AI initiative. But you could see the pieces coming into play with what they were funding and the kinds of events they were having. And one of the most important things, I think, is to be strategic. You don't have to throw yourself at every opportunity that's out there. That's going to be exhausting, and it's probably not a great way to spend your time. So think about, what are you really good at as a PI? What is your group really, where do you shine? What do you have that nobody else has? And do you have the right ingredients to win with a particular sponsor? Sometimes that's thinking about what post-award looks like, too. DARPA, as another, just using that same example, they're super needy. They want to talk to you all the time if they give you money. And so you have to feed them a lot of information. They want to come and spend time with you, and they want you to come out to DC, and they'll only give you a few weeks' notice. Knowing that before you propose is pretty important. So if you have that kind of bandwidth, it can really be worth it for you. But if you're stretched for time or maybe just getting started, it can be kind of rough. Have you guys seen the show Chopped on Food Network? Where they give you a basket of random ingredients and you're supposed to make some fantastic meal out of fish and cream soda and garlic, which sounds just totally horrible. Make sure that you're not putting yourself in a Chopped kind of situation. The folks that you bring to the table for your proposal should all have a reason to go together and should be good ingredients with one another, unlike this hideous basket here on your right. To make sure that those ingredients go together, sometimes GSI will do informational events. So when a Young Faculty Award or Young Investigator program will come out, we'll bring everybody together and say, hey, here are the requirements for the program. Here are the topic areas that they're interested in. Here are the program managers that are participating. So you know that you're going to be a good fit. So you're not going to be in a fish and cream soda situation. Isn't that gross? That's going to really stick with you, that analogy. I think this is a good one. Knowing if we have, oops, I went a little too fast, sorry. Knowing what the connection is with the organization and the PI. Do we have established, relationships with them? Do we have examples of winning proposals that we could look at? Do we have people that have executed similar programs in the past that can say, yeah, I worked on this, and here are the snags, and here's why it's worth it to me, and to learn a little bit more about why it might be worth it for you? And this is where I hand it over to Christina to talk about how to staff your kitchen.
Our team, all right. So how many head chefs are there in a kitchen? Uno. And why is there only one head chef?
To avoid confusion.
Thanks, Jamie.
I will answer your question.
You need an ultimate decision maker on some of these things, and it just helps to have one person doing that. But there are a lot of people, obviously, who are extremely important to the entire proposal. And it's good to bring all those people together and to understand their roles and responsibilities, because everyone does bring a unique aspect to your proposal. Really be thinking about who these people are from the get-go. You may not have that completely in place by the time of your kickoff meeting, which I'll talk about in a second, but put some thought into this. And that key personnel one, be thinking about, are there people outside of the PI and co-Is who you need to bring into this proposal? Plug for RAs here, please, please, please. If you're the PI, make sure you're connecting with your RA from the get-go. It will really ensure that you have a successful proposal.
Christina, if a PI says, well, I'm not sure I'm going to submit, should they still contact their RA?
They should still contact their RA, because the opportunity might come up. It might be a cyclical thing. It might come up again, and it's good for the RA to be aware of the sponsor and the opportunity. And you might at the last minute decide, after all, you are going to submit, and the RA will be prepped. Okay? So proposal manager. What, Jamie? You're asking, why should you have a proposal manager? I'm so glad you asked that question. What can a proposal manager bring to the table, you ask? A proposal manager can basically be a cat herder and pull together all of those bits for you. Can set up and facilitate your team meetings. Hopefully you're having a bunch of team meetings throughout the process. Can track action items to make sure they don't slip through the cracks. That's very important. Can be sort of a liaison between all these people in your team. Can email the sponsor point of contact and ask questions on behalf of the PI. Can be sort of the logistical manager, especially if you have a distributed team that's physically distributed. Barbara and I were talking about time zones and how challenging that can be if you have an international team. Your proposal manager can do that for you and take a lot of those tasks off the plate of the PI so that the PI can focus on writing. Question, yes?
Is the proposal manager the same person as the PI?
No, great question.
Who is the proposal manager, or how do you find him or her?
Faye, would you like to talk about that? You have a microphone.
You just open the big black box.
For the next half hour, we can talk about this.
Proposal managers exist in certain units like GSI and also at the university level. At the university level in KED, they are attached to large-scale proposals. At GSI, they are attached to GSI proposals. They also exist, I don't know, does Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College have one? Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College has one, and GEOS, the Global Institute of Sustainability, has one. So these, and engineering has one. Tara, don't forget engineering. So they're slowly becoming more popular. But if you're a faculty member, the chances that you will be in touch with a proposal manager is higher. However, depending on the workload in your department or school, you might get an ear or some time of that person's, depending on what you're asking.
Thank you.
That's a good one. And I would say if you're working on something defense related specifically, we can take that into account because that falls under our area of responsibility. If somebody comes and says, hey, I want to do this proposal for the National Endowment for the Humanities, we're probably not going to be your best bet anyway because we don't understand that sponsor as well. So your proposal manager should be somebody that has some good sponsor knowledge and can help. And one of the examples I always use for PIs is, do you really want to worry about what fonts to use, or do you want to worry about the actual content of that and let somebody else who has, you know, this great eye for detail manage those things for you? There's a reason I call her Eagle Eye Nelson. That's because she is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Some cases too, you want, and I'm marking my way over to Carolyn. Hold on a second. In some cases, our research administrator will also serve in that capacity, depending on how skilled they are and what time they have.
Okay, thanks. Hi, I'm Carolyn. That's just what I wanted to add. Again, in the smaller units, and again, depending on the size of the proposal, I'm assistant director of a research center, but I function as a proposal manager and often as an RA for the project. And so you are just kind of making do. And I've worked with DoD sponsors, NEH, NSF, a lot of private foundations, and again, Institute for Humanities Research has similar folks, and probably in the social sciences, there's probably people scattered around that also sort of play multiple roles. So again, depending on your unit, it may roll out differently.
One of the nice things about Faye's organization is she brings these people together from all the different units so they can decide, okay, there's an opportunity, where does it go, who can handle it, where's the bandwidth, can we refer you to somebody?
You want to talk to?
Thanks for those comments. Other questions? Questions online? Okay. All right, so prepping your ingredients, Jamie touched on this earlier. These things that are bulleted here, you're not going to necessarily have on every single proposal, but they are tools that you can use before you start writing your proposal. And basically, they're like crafting your elevator pitch for your research. If you can successfully write some of these things, it will increase your chances of having a successful writing experience with your proposal as well. Jamie's going to talk about these Heilmeyer questions in a little bit. Really, really good stuff. Any questions about this before we move on? Okay. Kickoff meeting, yay! I love the kickoff meeting. It's a great opportunity to bring the whole team together, make sure everyone's on the same page, talk about all the 5,000 parts that are going to go into these proposals, and just get to know your team a little bit better. LJ has some goodie bags that if you can answer a question, you can get it. I am curious who has participated in a kickoff meeting. Yay, I saw 3 hands. Good job. Yeah, do you have any thoughts?
Oh, wow.
We're going to judge you on the quality.
Hi, so I'm from the Office of Corporate and Foundation Relations. I'm a grant writer there. So I've had some kickoff meetings with our development team members, faculty we're working with on their project proposal, just getting together everyone involved to start the process. I'm Kristen Travagline.
Great.
ASU Foundation.
Thanks for sharing that. So at your kickoff meeting, you want to make sure you're bringing together the whole team, especially the RA. The RA can contribute a lot of things that the PI maybe isn't necessarily thinking of or privy to. It's really an important person to have at your kickoff meeting. Kind of talk about your sponsor in general terms. What motivates your sponsor? What are they looking for? Talk about the FOA, the funding opportunity announcement. Kind of go through, you don't have to relive my line, obviously, but talk about what they're looking for in the FOA, because obviously you want to be compliant and put that in your proposal. So if you talk about it at the kickoff meeting, it's in everyone's head, oh yeah, we need to make sure that we're mentioning this when we're writing. Finalize the team members, I mentioned earlier. You may not have them all locked in at the kickoff meeting, but at least have that in your mind that, okay, we need to do this quickly. Because as we all know, a proposal window is not usually a year. Wouldn't that be lovely? Usually have weeks. And if it takes you weeks to finalize your team members, yeah, you're going to be out of luck. Talk about the roles and responsibilities of everyone who's part of your team. This is good, just sort of project management 101 to clarify who's doing what so that we're not stepping on each other's toes, but also stuff isn't going to slip through the cracks. Talk about the timeline. So this is actually one of my favorite things to do at the kickoff meeting, because if you talk about national holidays, ASU holidays and closures, is commencement right in the middle of your proposal window? Is someone going to be at a conference? Is the PI going to be on vacation? Once you start kind of rattling off all these things, you start to realize, oh, we've got these pockets here throughout the weeks of someone can't write or someone can't meet. And that's okay, that's life, but just get it on the table so that everybody's aware of what those possible challenges will be. Talk about how your team likes to talk. This may seem basic as well, but does everyone in the team prefer email? Does everyone prefer texting or instant messaging? There's no right or wrong here. The point is to figure out what works best for your team. And similarly, figuring out how you're going to share your documents. This is one of those things I think that we oftentimes take for granted, but if you don't establish that from the get-go, versions are floating somewhere, and no one knows, are they supposed to be emailing it? Are we saving it to a SharePoint site? What are we doing here with our versions? Again, no right or wrong, just make sure that the team is comfortable and on the same page with that. Faye?
Kickoff meetings have to be in person.
No, not necessarily. I mean, ideally, of course, just because communication in general is most effective, I believe, unbiased, in person. But this is our life, right? And especially if you have an international team, obviously, you're going to be doing Zoom or some sort of video conferencing. And that's one of the joys of living in our modern age, is that we do have options of meeting remotely. Other questions? And review action items, again, Project Management 101, but 9 times out of 10, in a meeting that I'm facilitating, when I review the action items, someone goes, oh wait, no, I didn't say I was going to do that. Or, oh, we talked about this, but it's not assigned to anyone. Just review your action items.
One of the greatest things I've seen come out of the kickoff meetings are making sure that the proposal and the team is responsive to the call. A lot of times people will come and they have a really great idea that is sort of adjacent to the call. Going through all the pieces of the proposal in the kickoff meeting and what's actually in the FOA or the BAA can help you narrow down in and submit something that's very responsive. Another way you can do that is with the Heilmeyer questions. If you've spent about 10 minutes with me ever, I've probably brought them up to you. They were invented by George H. Heilmeyer, a former DARPA director. He created these questions to help evaluate proposals. And while they started in DARPA, I think they can be very useful to anybody who's putting together a proposal, because they make you think through the different parts of it and the purpose of writing that proposal and making sure that it really does respond. So even if you are, writing something for performing arts, I do think these could actually be helpful for you. And here they are. We'll go through them one by one. The first one is, what are you trying to do? Articulate your objectives using absolutely no jargon. It is really hard to see where your own jargon is. We all take acronyms and phrases for granted, and it's important to have somebody that can look through your proposal and say, you didn't define that acronym, or that's not a standard phrase. You would think that the people evaluating your proposal are always going to be subject matter experts, just like you are. And that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes you have a review board, and not everybody is from your particular discipline. You may also get reviewers that are from the financial position or from operations, and it's good for them to know what exactly it is you're doing. Also, put yourself in the role of your proposal evaluator. You're probably going to be up pretty late at night and with a giant stack of proposals thinking, what is the best way for me to spend the money that I've been allocated for this project? Make it easy for your reviewer. Think about it from their perspective. How can you help them easily understand what you're going to do and the impact it's going to have? How is it done today, and what are the limits of current practice? So set the stage for your proposal. Let's say you're doing something medical, and you say, here are the methods that are being used right now. This is the current state of the art. This is who's doing it and why. This cues you up to be able to answer the next one, which is, what's new in your approach? And why do you think you're going to be successful? Having a great idea is one thing. Having a great new idea is another. You want to be able to show that what you're doing provides something that nobody else can provide. I've heard a DARPA program manager refer to a hidden Heilmeyer question, which is, why should you be funded? This is a great way to answer that. Because you have an idea, because you have a particular blend of expertise, because you have some particular equipment in your lab, because you have particular relationships. These kinds of things can help set you apart from anybody else that's proposing, which is really the key to winning. This is my favorite, who cares? And who cares should be the bigger who cares and should tie into the objectives of the group that you're proposing to. So let's say you're writing an education proposal and you're going to put together an educational program for a particular group of people in an area. Do they need that education? Is that something that's going to benefit them? And if so, be really specific about how. How is that going to benefit them? What are they going to do next? If you're successful, what difference is it going to make? So thinking about, even if it's a very risky proposal, say you're not sure it's going to work, there's a lot of dependencies in there. Being able to say that if we are successful, it's going to, produce graduates that are, more literate, or it's going to help us understand plant-based methods for pharmacology better, or whatever it is, whatever's your jam, make sure that that's in there and it's really well defined. What are the risks? My biomedical people always interpret this in the wrong way of like, well, the risks of this are, medical or the particular group, that we're testing on this isn't what they're asking here. What are the risks? What are the hard parts? What's difficult about what you're doing? And if you don't succeed, what might happen? I always tell people to put this into a little table in their proposal just because it's a nice way to set apart, here are the risky things about the proposal, about what I'm proposing, and here are my list of mitigations. Here's how I plan to get over those risks. It's important to show the sponsor that you've thought about why what you're doing is difficult and how you might overcome some of those. You may not encounter those difficulties, and you will probably encounter difficulties that weren't in your original list at all, and that's okay. One of my favorite quotes about DARPA is from Professor Dan Bliss, who says, if you execute a DARPA proposal exactly the same way that you proposed it, it shouldn't have been DARPA in the first place. So we understand it's basic research, it's always going to take twists and turns, but showing that foresight means that you really care about your sponsor and are the ones that can take care of that proposal. How much will it cost? Be reasonable about it. You don't have to be cheap, but just think through what's it actually going to take to get done. If it's a really ambitious proposal, you might have a really ambitious budget, and that's okay. You want to show that you've thought that through and that you understand what it's really going to take. The government is very used to people trying to lowball them and then coming back later for money. I used to work in industry that connected to the Department of Defense, and I saw that happen a lot. They don't like it, so just be really reasonable about what you're proposing to them. How long will it take? I recommend that people think about this in shorter bursts of time, maybe 6 to 12 months. What are your milestones along those periods of time? What can you get done and what can you deliver? Saying, hey, I'm going to need $5 million over 5 years and this is what I'm going to do is probably too big a chunk. That's a large risk for any funding agency to take. They want to be able to know, hey, if we funded you for a year, you can do something for us. And that way, if our funding situation changes and we don't have the same level of funding next year, that we'll still be able to make some progress with what you were able to do. And then what are the midterm and final exams to check for success? How do you know that you're on track? What are those things that you're looking for? If you reach particular milestones as you're developing, what are those things where you know you're going to have to either reevaluate your proposal and talk to your sponsor, or that you're right on track? And putting those things out there will help them to come back and evaluate you. So if you have the opportunity to make the test you're going to take, you should do it. And if you can answer these questions, you're better positioned than most people out there. A lot of people don't think about what the impact of that research is going to be, or what the risky parts are going to be, or make that comparison between what they're proposing and the way things are right now. All right, so to get back into the nitty-gritty, Christina can talk about the proposal plan workbook.
Are there any questions about the Heilmeier questions?
Yes.
Faye?
Finer point on the fact that those are scalable and discipline agnostic.
Yes.
They're scalable and discipline agnostic. So you can use these questions regardless of where you're at, which was stated, but I just want to make a clear point of that. We like the Heilmeier as well.
Yay.
Thank you. Okay, so getting into some of the detail work here, I strongly, strongly recommend you have some sort of document or repository where all of those floating parts of your proposal can live. And it will help with cross-checking, it will help with communication, it will help with ease of mind if you just have some singular place where it's all living. I personally use an Excel workbook, nothing fancy obviously, with different tabs, and I'll go through some of this with you guys. An overview tab that talks about who's your sponsor, what's the name of the program, what's the name of your proposal, who are your team members, their email addresses, their affiliation. I even copied the blurb, the synopsis blurb from the FOA and plunk it in there just to have front of mind what exactly we're working on. Duration.
Hey, Christy, I'm going to interrupt you real quick.
Yeah.
I see a couple people like writing and typing furiously. Yeah. We have an example workbook that we're happy to share. So don't feel like you have to write all this down, like absorb it, and then we'll show you the example in the slides, and then we could even give you a copy of it too.
Thank you, Jamie.
Sure.
I have a tab where questions for the PI, where I am asking one-on-one, usually before the kickoff meeting I meet, either in person or on the phone with the PI, to talk about things as mundane as, hey, who's going to run the meetings? Talk about the proposal components. Your RA will have this checklist as well. Most proposal managers and project managers have a checklist. The PI probably has made his or her own checklist. Someone needs to have the checklist. It's a great cross-check. And I'll show you a screenshot of mine in a second here. The graphics, I always like to have one place where you list every graphic that's in your proposal. Again, it's a great cross-check. You can very quickly see, oh, we have 3 figure 3s. Maybe we should rename one of them. Timeline, I do a modified Gantt chart in Excel where it lists the tasks, do your timeline across, and then who's the owner of that task. And then I have some writing prompts. Most PIs don't necessarily fill these out, but again, they're a prompt. It's a way to kind of get the juices flowing as you're writing to be thinking about some of the things Jamie just mentioned, actually. And then other random things that might help your proposal be successful, like a time zone converter. So here's an image. Obviously, you're not going to read this word for word. It's a screenshot. Notice on the bottom here, these tabs, these are the ones I just ran through, like the overview and the graphics and the timeline. This one happens to be the checklist. Again, nothing necessarily unique about this, but it's very detailed. On the left-hand side, you can see here cover sheet, summary, bio sketches, and the page in the FOA that it cross-references to. Is there a page limit? I always highlight this in red so that we can see, oh yeah, can't go over 2 pages for this particular thing, and then just extra notes here. This has saved me many, many times, just being able to see it. I'm very visual, so it helps me to see it written out, and I can go check, check. Any questions or thoughts about something like this?
This has saved several proposals, really, too, from from being uncompliant. So
Yeah.
we'll go through and scan this through and realize, oh, this PI is working on a couple of proposals at the same time, and they've mixed up the lengths of their executive summaries or something like that. LJ?
I just wanted to share, Candace Black Online said, "This is beautiful."
It is beautiful, Christina. Nice job.
And Trista Zobit says, "Yes, please share afterwards." Yes.
Thank you, online people.
Thank you. Questions? Okay. Yeah.
This is also scalable, so you don't have to do this insane amount. you can do less and still get a fairly significant ROI on it.
Yeah.
So for like NSFs that are just the 8 documents, you can scale it down. But the level of sheets is also advisable. So you keep the timelines and the checklists and the reviews, but the quantity of information per page might scale according to your effort.
Thank you. Yeah. This is merely an example. Please don't feel like you have to do this, obviously. It's just an example. Okay, keyed steering. These are ways that you can ensure or encourage your proposal to be successful, either the one you're working on or in the future. Have regular proposal team meetings. This is so important. I always recommend at least a weekly team meeting. Sometimes, especially the larger the team, you're not going to get every single person on the team at every single meeting, obviously. And sometimes you just have to say, okay, putting a stake in the ground, Tuesdays at 10, that's our team meeting, and whoever can make it can make it. That's okay, because you also will probably have some subgroups that spin off and have their own meetings. Great, more communication the better. You know, PI talking with one co-I, or PI talking with a couple co-Is, or PI talking to the RA. Awesome, great, but just make sure that that's part of the culture of the proposal team, is to have regular team meetings. Because if you have the kickoff meeting and then don't talk again until the day before you're submitting, there's a lot that can happen in between there, right? Red team review, yay! Shout out for red team review. This is extremely important. A red team review is where you have your final draft of the proposal, you hand it off to someone who's not necessarily intimately involved in your proposal, in fact shouldn't be, to do a read through. And that person doesn't need to be a subject matter expert. Sometimes it's better if they're not, actually, because as Jamie mentioned, not every reviewer who's reviewing your proposal is going to be in your field. So whoever's conducting that red team review can give fresh eyes, read through, and give you really valuable feedback. Is there a ton of jargon? Is there something that's confusing? Do you have 3-figure threes? All these things that when you're looking at it every single day, you don't see it. Just curious, raise a hand, who's participated in a red team review? Excellent, good. Do we want awards? Would you like to share any thoughts on it? Anyone? And you get a KED goodie bag if you're willing to share. You don't have to. No pressure.
Micro.
So it doesn't really. I feel like it doesn't count. I've had kind of different red team like experiences.
Okay.
But part of the reason I was really interested to come today was I just worked with a team who did everything wrong. So I was like, I need a refresher on how to advise them better. But the one that was like a formal red team review was with the OCAD International Development Team. And that was great. I mean, it was a really great proposal. Unfortunately, we didn't win. And but it was really great having feedback. We did a pink team and then a red team. So we had the original draft, got feedback on that draft, and then we did a second red team review. And again, it was with people who knew the funder really well, although they didn't know this particular project. So they were able to really give clear-cut feedback that improved that final submission. There were other issues relating to the size of that project and ASU's qualifications that actually affected our progress through the course. But I hope that is helpful.
And then we had a question online from Arena. I am new to this. Maybe my question is not relevant. Do you have an evaluation/review rubric example to share?
So I usually go back to the Heilmeyers when I'm doing a review, whether it's for DARPA or not. It's just a good way for me to think through, is there the clarity and the purpose in this proposal that should be there? I've used them for proposals to industry or even foundations before. I think that helps to cover all of the bases. One recommendation I would also have is a lot of PIs don't want to do that red team review because it's not going to be perfect, and it's not like it's just not there, it's not there, it's not there, and then it's the deadline. Don't worry about it that much. Like red team reviewers are here to help you and can help even provide, say you have a section you think, I don't really know if this is clear, or I think this is maybe duplicative, what do you think? A red team reviewer can help you resolve some of those things. So Chris, I did a red team review for you. Was it terrible, or how was it? Okay. So
Those of you online, hold on a second.
Yeah, we're still waiting to hear back on that one, but the intention is for it to be like a collaborative process. So, as you know, in a red team review, I'll ask a lot of questions like, "Hey, is this what you meant, or is this a way to phrase this?" Because I know I'm not the subject matter expert in what you're proposing, but can think of different ways to frame it. And I'm interested. I think people would benefit from hearing the red team reviewed side.
I thought it was very beneficial for me. You cut a lot of things that I just didn't really think about, and jargon especially. Especially since it was one of my first proposals. It was extremely beneficial.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and I haven't heard back the result of the proposal yet, so still fingers crossed.
We're waiting. Yeah, we still have our fingers crossed on that one.
Is it on? Okay. Two-parter. So how do I go about getting a review if I am working on a proposal? And is there an opportunity for us to review other proposals as a part of the red team?
That is a good question.
I think it falls into the category of will you be working with a proposal manager or not? But I want to also encourage you to think about if you were to host your own red team review, what would that look like? So this again it's an industry model, but it's scalable. So if you were to go out and find, so everybody has a different definition of red team. Just generally, it's a review prior to submission, 98%, 95% done proposal. We in KED try and do at least one voice from sponsor. So one reads it with sponsor intent, one reads it with subject matter expertise, and then one is like a technical person, so a compliance read. So if you can fit those bills and you can find people who are in your cohort or friendly to you, not even necessarily friendly, but know their biz, invite them in and to read your proposal. Oftentimes NDAs aren't required, but encouraged if you're going to talk about something excellent. So you don't have to do, you can do it in a, always recommend a very formal setting. We use the checklist that Christina identified, so you can use your checklist for compliance, but then you'd want to read it with the How Myers also, is like, does this make sense? Does it, da-da-da? So you can do a mini version of that. How you participate in one is a better question because they're kind of rolling out across campus, and I think it would be great to include more peer reviews, peers participating. But again, it would be a peer review of science, which is not the same as a red team review.
You know, I just wanted to add that one thing that helps if you don't really have the process of the red team review is actually if you're working with like a proposal editor, because they're also asking a lot of those same questions if they know what they're doing. And actually that I worked with Dana on a couple, and she was awesome before she came on board at GEOS, because she was like, what do you mean by this? She was asking all of those questions, you know, how are you going to do this? And I think you guys have the editing team up there. And partly forcing that, you know, working with an editor also forces everybody into a better timeline of getting their stuff done early. And it's kind of, it's not a formal red team, but it kind of can substitute.
Agreed, and we do have the takeaways. KED, it's a different office than ours, but KED has free editing, and there's little postcards at the back of the room, and also online. LJ has a question.
Oh no, this was, Jennifer just had a comment from online. We at SFIS have encouraged our faculty to plan on having 85% complete draft of their narrative and a budget sketch. This seems to have taken a lot of pressure off, and they're much more willing to hand off documents.
That's a really good idea. And then there's a little bit of flexibility in there too. You don't spend a lot of time hammering at one particular section and then have your red team reviewer throw most of it out. So.
Great, good discussion. Anything else? Okay, I'm going to crank through some of these. A retrospective after you've actually submitted, I'll talk more about this in a second. Be thinking about what you can submit to that's similar to the one you're already submitting to. So you've put a ton of time and effort into writing this proposal. Think about a way that you can repurpose this proposal. Tracking your unit's proposal activity is extremely beneficial. It will start to show you trends. If you write stuff down, you'll start to see some trends. Are there certain sponsors who you have really good traction with? Are there certain sponsors who you keep submitting to and you're not getting the wins? Be thinking about, you know, areas that you're proposing in. Are the topics maybe not right for your team? It's okay. It's just having it written down shows you those trends, and you can tweak your strategy a little bit. Okay, stating the obvious here, but submit your proposal on time. And in fact, even early. So we have one more bag here. Why is it important to submit early? Kind of touched on this. Yes. So the mistakes can be caught. Good. Prize coming towards you. Thank you.
So mistakes can be caught and corrected.
Good. Any other thoughts of why it's good to submit early?
So think about the infrastructure. If everybody is submitting their proposals to grants.gov at 11:57 p.m. for a midnight deadline, what's going to happen to grants.gov? So you want to avoid getting caught up in that.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity for technical difficulties, as maybe some of us have experienced. Databases not talking to each other, systems crashing, regularly scheduled maintenance you had no idea was happening. Plus, once the PI hands off to the RA, that's not the end. There are several steps that happen. So we don't want to either run the risk of not doing all those steps or truncate those steps. Those are very important steps.
That's really worth emphasizing, that once you save the proposal _final, there's still a lot of things that have to be done, and those are important things.
Yeah. Plus, it's just stressful. Why do that to yourself? Okay. Quick word about retrospectives. I want to make sure we're doing okay on time here. A retrospective is sometimes called a lessons learned meeting, a postmortem. If you're familiar with the military, you may have heard the term hot wash. Has anyone participated in a retrospective? And it may not even be a proposal one, just a project retrospective. I'm curious, show of hands. Yeah, great. Is there anyone who's brave enough to share? No, I don't want to share. If it was a positive or a negative.
Someone online, Juliana Carson says AAR, after action review.
Oh, yet another term. Great. So we want these to be positive. We don't want them to be negative. I have participated in some, not here at ASU, but in a former life, where it was, finger pointing, throwing people under the bus. You don't want that. You want this to be positive. You don't want it to induce fear, like this meme here. You want it to be positive. This is an opportunity to learn and to do better next time. Some things that you should talk about, just celebrate the fact that you did it. You got this in on time. Yay. I always have treats. It's amazing how many people will come if you tell them there's candy bars and chips. Strongly recommend that. Recap how this proposal came to be. I asked the PI to kind of talk about those early steps before the whole team came together. And this has been surprisingly beneficial, because hearing that story, oftentimes you'll say, oh yeah, we should replicate that, because that's how we heard about it. It wasn't necessarily the posting, the public posting of it. It might have been a behind-the-scenes thing. Talk about what went well, obviously, and talk about what could go better next time. We don't want to be totally Pollyanna about this. That's kind of the point, is that you can nip in the bud anything that didn't go quite awesome and not do it again. And then talk about what happens after you've submitted. So just because you've submitted doesn't mean it stops, right? The whole point is to win. So before you get that announcement that you've won, what are all the steps that you need to do and ducks to get in a row? Do you need to hire people? Do you need to start writing your job descriptions right now? Do you think that the IRB process is going to be crazy? Kind of be thinking through those steps, that as soon as you get the green light, you want to hit the ground running. That's it. Yep.
Yeah. Well, all of the retrospectives that I've participated in here have been really friendly and open, and a lot was learned about that, and we've seen that people are able to build on what they learn in the retrospective for the proposals that they do next time. So, and snacks are good. Yeah.
There's a proposal development workshop that's focused on debriefing after the next one. So there's a one on actual sections next, and then the one after that is figuring out how to do a debrief, because we do those really regularly in CAD.
Great. Nice. Very cool. So we hope that this analogy has resonated with you. We hope that we've been able to provide some good information about pursuing proposals in a really intentional and organized way. I note that we are getting really close to the end of our time here. So instead of going through this whole recap, we'll just let you know that the slides will be made available. An example of Christina's proposal workbook, which is indeed a thing of beauty, will be available as well. And we appreciate you being in the audience here and online and asking really good questions. We wanted to put up the list of workshops that's coming up. So You can come in and find out winning proposals, what elements make a winning proposal. I think Faye's group is going to provide some examples of language that specifically resonated with sponsors. So that's a way to dig in and see what has been successful in the past. That debrief and next steps workshop that Faye just mentioned is coming up in April. And then figuring out how do you take what you've done and move it around to different sponsors. That'll come up in May. So you bet. All right, well, and are there any final questions or anything in the next few minutes that you guys want to talk about?
So if you have a call come out like you're waiting for it, it's the coupled natural and human systems NSF, which is big in sustainability. What we were doing for a while is having, like, we know it's going to come out, we have a meeting, we bring all these people together, and everybody comes in and, well, I want to do statistics and I want to do, but nobody wants to take the lead. Like, they all are looking for a team to join, but we don't have a leader, and so everybody disperses and that's the end of it. So do you have any recommendations for how to make those kinds of meetings more effective?
Those are tough meetings. We've definitely been in those particular meetings before. And sometimes we'll meet with somebody beforehand to try and see, like, hey, this lines up well with you. Either you have the credibility with the sponsor, if that's what the sponsor values, or the sponsor is looking for somebody new and we think you would line up well. So sometimes we try to get somebody thinking about taking on that PI ship. I am trying to think if there have been proposals that we just haven't pursued for lack of a PI.
One tip is to have a go, no-go date. If someone hasn't bubbled up by April 15th, then, you know, we're not going to pursue this. That sometimes helps.
Yeah.
But then also you might want to explore the facilitation workshop that's being offered in March that Christina, I think, is registered for. Because active facilitation of a group might bubble somebody up.
Yeah, this question is on the same lines. Lately, I've been working with faculty, and they want to imagine themselves always as co-directors. So what ends up happening is it's almost the same thing. Everyone's waiting for somebody else to take that first action. So my question also was, do you have any suggestions for how to facilitate? If they want to call themselves co-directors, fine, but how do you somebody's got to be responsible.
Yeah, somebody's got to take the actual lead role and be responsible, otherwise things get stuck in committee forever. We've seen that, and so yeah, we've tried the co-director thing and it definitely does not work.
New chef.
Yes, one head chef and a lot of others. So sometimes we'll carve out areas of responsibility in the proposal and have one person like, okay, you have the subject matter expertise in statistics, so you're going to be in charge of this part, but then by such and such a date, you'll need to submit it to so-and-so because this is, you know, an education proposal and they're the education person. Other thoughts on that? Because it can be difficult.
The field or the focus or the topic of the proposal, someone's going to be really strong in that area, and you maybe want that person to be writing and focused on that. Someone might have strengths in administration and be a great leader and a great manager, but not necessarily in that subject matter. Those are different skill sets sometimes, and so sometimes thinking, okay, if John Doe is focusing on the subject matter expertise, and Jane Doe's really good at leadership and facilitation. She's the PI. Or sometimes if you're thinking like career-wise, if you have a junior faculty who maybe needs an opportunity to lead, be thinking about, you know what, this is the perfect chance for this person to lead a project. They haven't had the opportunity yet.
Yeah, along those lines, we've had I work with a few faculty groups that tend to propose together. And they tend to always have the same person be the PI, and then this person gets pretty overloaded. And I have a good relationship with these particular groups. We've been working long enough, so we can go into our kickoff meeting and I'll say, great, one of the goals of our meeting is to not have Professor so-and-so be the PI, because they, you know, have a lot going on. You know, they can act as a mentor or act as a co-I, but let's try to move somebody else into that position.
Okay.
And this is not a question, but a comment from online. Barbara Shea says, thank you, great presentation and tools.
Thank you, Barbara.
Other questions? Yes.
I just had a question. I like all the information that's being given and, sort of bringing teams of people together and planning everything out. And you started sort of the presentation with a chart showing, sort of the increase in the amount of funding that you guys have been able to achieve over the last, it's like 10 years or more. What is the lower threshold, roughly, of the type of money you will go after putting together a team like this? Like, where do you throw the threshold, the low threshold where I'm not sure we need a full-blown team to go after, obviously, like a $50,000
Right.
right. But
Yeah.
what do you got, like, when you're putting together a team like this, what is the lower threshold for the kind of money you're actually trying to target here?
I tend to think of it by sponsor instead of by financial threshold. So let's say you came in and you said, I have this really cool idea and it matches up really well with IARPA or DARPA, because those are like some of my key sponsors. And you say, look, if we're able to grab this, then we could, build it up into something bigger, or it would really strengthen a relationship, or it would connect us to a brand new program manager. That is interesting at a smaller dollar amount to me than, like, say, like $50K for something strategic with DARPA means more to my organization than like $120K with NSF in an area that we don't particularly have strength. Does that make sense? So the way that, different groups think about it in different ways. We have that latitude because we're a smaller organization with like a narrower focus, but we're always happy to have that conversation as well. I get a lot of people come in and say, hey, I want to propose, and this is what I want to go after, and we'll either say, yeah, that belongs in our house and we'll help you out, or that probably should go through like the materials center or somewhere else.
And also know what the typical funding amount for your particular discipline, because it's not apples to apples. Certain disciplines, $1 million proposal is no big deal, but for other disciplines, that's unheard of, because they're usually $50,000, you know what I mean? So and I'm not saying that's what you were saying, to have $1 amount across all disciplines. I just wanted to call it out to say that picking a number is not going to be the same across the board.
Does that help?
Okay. And we've got one more minute if there's any other questions. There was a final comment online. Thank you, great presentation. Appreciate your sharing the slides. Helps takes the pressure off in taking notes and allows for more focused listening. That's from Dorothy Sears.
Thank you, that was our hope.
Thanks,
so I'm glad it
Dorothy.
worked.
Thank you.
All right,
all for
well,
your
thank you
comments.
again.